This is a video on the clarinet solo at the beginning of the Wombles theme tune. I'm going to play how it was written in its original form, and then I'm going to play a reharmonized jazz version, which is going to focus on things a jazz piano player can do with the left hand. To start with, here is how the clarinet solo goes. And then it will go into the bit that everybody knows. So let's have a look at that melody I've just played. We're in the key of C, and it starts with a C major arpeggio in the first inversion. Like that, starting on the E, E, G, C, but with the chromatic leading note of D sharp, so. And then we have it again, separated by one beat rest, and after that there's a chromatic passage going down from the C to the G. The target is the F sharp, so, but that doesn't add up to the right number of notes in the bar, so we do a very common thing that jazz players will do here is overshoot the target note by, say, a semitone, which we'll do here, going into F natural instead, and then that leads back up to the target note, which is F sharp, which now all fits into the space of one bar, and then the F sharp's on the first beat of the next bar. So far. And then a really cool little thing, which I always thought of was going to be a little blues lick thing like. Now it's a bit simpler than that. The E and the F sharp remain constant, and it's the top line that comes down. So. Then we've got this section here, which is based around a G major chord in first inversion again, but with chromatic notes in there as well. And then we have it again offset by one beat, like the first section, which leads to a little bit of chromaticism there. Which sets up the C there. And the thing finishes with just a bluesy lick. The chords for this in its original form would be C for 2 bars, and then 2 bars of D7. D7 leads onto a G chord, D being the dominant of G. But we're talking more G7 here. So it's going to be G7 because G7 is going to be the dominant of C, which is where we want to get back to. So. There. And then the last 2 bars, it's a busier turnaround. So it's kind of a C, C over B flat, A minor 7, F7, which is an odd one, but it's dictated by this A in the melody here. If you're thinking we would go to an A flat chord, that's going to clash there, so we go to the F7 chord instead, which then we do a 1 C5 1. So that's the dominant in the bass for the first chord there, and then again for the dominant chord. So for the chords in the original version, the left hand would play something like this. bass line here is really simple. One of the reasons this music is so effective is because the bass line is so simple. It goes like this. So all of this together would sound like this. So that's the original version. And then I was doing some practice of left-hand chords for playing jazz improvisation on the piano. And I thought, what jazz chords would fit underneath the Wombles theme? And so I'm not going to be using any standard triads or any of the chords that we've just looked at, things like C chord or G chord or D, or not even a D7, just in that very simple shape there. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated now. The most important thing to know is that as a jazz piano player, I'm not really interested in playing the root note of the chord too much with the left hand, because in a gig situation, I may well have a bass player with me who can play those notes for me. So for me, those notes become redundant. So a chord like C, instead of playing this, I might actually just play this. And you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't look like much of a C chord. So here's my chord of C. But I'm not going to use it like that. I'm going to change this around a bit. So we know that the root note is redundant. We don't need the root. So I'll take away the C at the bottom. I'm left with that. The next alteration I'm going to make, I'm going to change the fifth to the sixth. So this now is a C6 chord. Looks like an A minor chord in second inversion, but remember in the bass we've got a C there. And you don't need the fifth. We're actually going to use it eventually in a second, but for now we've got the third and the sixth. And I'm going to change this other C to a D, which is the ninth of the chord. And this gives me what's called a C6-9 chord, which is a C chord that has the sixth and the ninth in, and the core note here is the third. And because this would clash with the melody here, I'm going to play the melody an octave higher now, so like that. I'm actually going to voice this up here as well, so I've still got the sixth and the ninth, and I've got my core chord note of G, which is the fifth. I'm using this voicing because it's going to follow on to the next chords a little bit better than if I played it down here. They're kind of interchangeable, these two chords, if we're playing this C6-9 sound. It gives us a pentatonic type sound. The pentatonic scale has the sixth and the ninth, or in this case the second, but it's the same note. It has it in the scale. So I can use either that or that because I get this pentatonic quality from the sixth and the ninth. So I'm going to use that one. The next two bars, we have this in the melody. And there's a lot of movement there. I'm going to use a chord sequence here where the chords follow on from themselves because each preceding chord was the dominant of that chord. So you have the dominant of the dominant of the dominant of the dominant, which is what you have as you go around the circle of fifths. You might think of this as a 6-2-5-1, or in fact I think we've got a 3-6-2-5-1 coming here. So what I'm going to do is plan ahead here. I know I've got to get to a G chord in the third section of this tune. G, so I can work backwards. So the dominant of G is D, dominant of D is A, dominant of A is E, and the dominant of E is B. And I've gone that far because I know I've got 4 chords to fill. We're going to give each chord 2 beats here. So that's 4 chords to use before we get to the G chord. So I can have 2 beats of B, 2 of E, 2 of A, and 2 of D, and that will lead me onto the G. So I could just play something using standard dominant 7th chords, like, which will get me onto the G. which would sound like this. Which sounds okay, but I'm going to go one step further and use some even crunchier chords in here, and I'll try my best to explain what I'm doing here. I'm going to use a chord that has dissonance within itself. For example, G sharp and G natural in the same chord. And I'm going to balance that out with this note that comes in the middle of them. And the important thing here is that note forms a tritone with the lower note there. And then we have a perfect fourth above that. So tritone, perfect fourth. And this chord here, I'm going to give this one of two names. I'm either going to call it a 7 sharp 9 chord, where we have the 7th and the sharpened 9th and the major third of the chord. So this would be an E 7 sharp 9. Or if I rearrange things a bit, I can think of this as a 13th chord. So in the 13th chord, I've got the flattened 7th, A flat, I've got the 3rd, D, and I've got the 13th, which is G. So this would be a B flat 13 chord. So I've either got B flat 13 or E 7 sharp 9. Now between E and B flat, these are a tritone apart. So I can employ a bit of tritone substitution here, which is where I can choose which bass note to use underneath the chord. I can either use this one or I can use this one. It gives me two fantastic chords. So I'm going to plan this out. Now I need to start on B, we said, so B, and I'm going to start with a B13 chord. The reason being is B13 is going to sit more around middle C, which is where I want to be to get the best sound. If I did B7 sharp 9, it would be down here, a little bit low, or up here, a little bit high. So B13 works best. And then I'm going to go to the E7 sharp 9 chord, which is here. So I've got this 3 and this is the 6 with a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Now I could do this, which would be tritone substitution. Going from the B, and then I have another 13th chord. Because as we go around a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, the chords will flip from 13th to 7 sharp 9. If I go parallel down a chromatic scale, they will all stay the same, either all 13th or all 7 sharp 9. But if I play a perfect fifth in between each bass note, we get the flipping between, and that's a 7 sharp 9, 13, 7 sharp 9, 13. So we had a B13, E7 sharp 9, and then the next one is an A chord, A13, D7 sharp 9, which is going to lead me on to G13, which is a really tasty chord, and I'm going to leave that as the basis for the next two bars. And there we are on the G13 chord. So G in the bass, G in the 7th, the 3rd, and the 13th. So here. So I could leave that as G13 for the whole two bars there, like I did with the C chord at the beginning. But we're going towards the C chord at the end of this. So I need to get back from G to C, and I really want to emphasize this progression from G to C. So I'm going to add another chord in there, which will be a D chord, because that will give me, instead of just a 5-1, I get a 2-5-1. So I'm going to put a D minor 7 chord in there. Minor chord, because remember we're in C major, and the voicing I'm going to use is actually this, because for me that fits quite well under my fingers. This is the one exception. I can use the root note if I really want to, so I'm going to hear the D. So I've got my G13 chord and my D minor 7 chord. Like that. And then I could go pocket C. But no, I'm going to do another 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 over this using the same planning I did before, so I need to work backwards. I know after the 2 bars the chord I need to be on is C. So again, I'm going to work backwards from C. So if C is 1, 5 is G, 2 is D, 6 is A, and 3 is E. So I know I need to start on an E chord. And using that same process I did earlier, I'm going to use the 7 sharp 9 and the 13th chords. And I can work out that the one I want is E7 sharp 9, because that fits best around middle C. Again, if I used E13, a little bit high, a little bit low. So there's my chords, so E7 sharp 9, A13, D7 sharp 9, G13, which will lead back to the C6-9 chord we had. And this time, it's this voicing down here, because that follows on much better. And there we are. So the whole thing sounds like this.